What's going on, summoners, and welcome back to another Wild Rift video. My name is Kangas, and today we'll be going over our tier list for after the 1.1 mid-patch update. But before we get into that, make sure to join our Discord in the link down below where we're doing a huge skin giveaway. All you gotta do is sub to the channel, join the Discord, and follow the instructions in there. Alright, let's get into the video. First up, the dust has settled a bit more for this patch, and Darius, to no one's surprise, has risen to the top of the Baron lane extremely quickly. Wild Rift games are short and fast-paced, and you don't always get the opportunity to make use of your late game potential on champs like Nasus and Vayne. Darius, on the other hand, is extremely dominant through the entire lane phase and is a force to be reckoned with in early skirmishes. His scaling is not to be looked down upon either, as he often runs through entire team comps, executing them all with his ultimate. Something else to consider is that Teleport is no longer a summoner spell on the Wild Rift since it's now a boot enchant. This means Darius doesn't actually lose anything for opting into Ghost as his second summoner spell, giving him increased mobility for skirmishes and teamfights. Between his immensely powerful early game and strong snowball potential while being easy to learn, Darius is absolutely the king of the Baron lane. Next up, our previous assessment of Malphite turned out to be much too low, as Malphite is one of the best picks for the Baron lane right now. His weakness lies in his early game before he gets his ultimate, but on the Wild Rift, level 5 comes pretty quickly, so you hit your power spike very early on. Malphite is extraordinarily tanky against all compositions, but especially against heavy AD compositions, which just so happen to be very popular right now. His ultimate, Unstoppable Force, is a powerful engage tool that is great for dealing with any fed enemies. The common counterplay to his ult is flashing away from it, but that's very hard to consistently do on Wild Rift, which makes him even more reliable. With decent laning, early access to his ultimate, and being extremely beefy, Malphite is dominating the ladder at the moment, and you should definitely pick him up if you want some wins. Meanwhile, Singed has dropped down into the B tier for our tier list this patch. Darius, one of the most broken champs on this patch, makes it extremely hard for Singed to lane, and he's just not reaching the same level of effectiveness that most of the other Baron lane picks do. Singed is also quite hard to play well, and most of his laning phase and teamfighting power comes from him having excellent game knowledge. His mechanics aren't difficult, but you'll always find yourself CC'd and blown up if you aren't careful. Currently, it's just not worth the time to master Singed, and the other champions for the Baron lane have proven far better and need much less time invested for them to find success. So here's our updated tier list for the Baron lane. Before we get into our jungle tier list, I want to remind you all that ProGuides is giving away tons of skins, so make sure to join our Wild Rift Discord in the description below and sub to the channel to get in the running. Seriously, that's all you gotta do. Sub to the channel, join the Discord, and check the instructions in the giveaway channel so you don't miss out. Now, let's get back to the video. Shyvana has been absolutely ravaging the Rift lately. Her clear speed is currently just unmatched, so she's always running around with a level lead and better items than the enemy jungler. Shyvana's dueling and skirmishes throughout the game are also very powerful, and most champs just don't stand a chance at fighting her in melee range. She is weak to being kited, but can easily close the gap with Dragon's Descent, and then stay in range with Burnout. She excels at killing tanks and squishies alike, and is just generally overtuned right now, especially if you can't effectively kite her with your composition. So Shyvana has found her home in the OP tier, and is pretty easy to pick up and play, so lock her in whenever you can. Evelynn has turned out to be very good at punishing mistakes in the hectic and fast-paced games of Wild Rift. Everyone's running from objective to objective and taking every skirmish they can find, so there are countless opportunities for Evelynn to pick people off and burst them down. The general counterplay for Evelynn is to play the game slowly, group up, and only take specific fights. But in the current landscape of the Wild Rift, that never really happens. Her clear is also quite speedy, and she's only weak until she gets her ultimate. But level 5 comes around quickly, and you're ready to go hunt people down very fast. She's not as broken as Shyvana or Amumu, but she's a solid S-tier jungler for now, and is great at solo carrying games. We realized that we initially rated Graves too highly on our first tier list, and we've dropped him down to B tier because he's just not showing the same level of performance as the other junglers. It's important for Graves to abuse his range advantage and duel melee junglers, and he needs solid kiting to be able to win your skirmishes. More often than not, he's just getting run down by champions like Shyvana, or outranged and CC'd by champs like Seraphine or Ashe. It's pretty hard to make Graves work right now, and while he might find better success in higher elos, for now we're just not confident in his performance. So here's our updated tier list for the jungle. Before we get into the rest of the video, we gotta go over our question of the day. What champion do you think is underrated on the Wild Rift right now? The game is still super fresh and there's no real statistics out there for win rates, so I'm sure there's some sleeper OP champs or builds still undiscovered. And in a previous video we had asked, who's your favorite AD carry currently in the game? Never Gonna Give You Up said, Ezreal of course, because his ult is just so fun to use. I would agree Never Gonna Give You Up, except personally, I think Ashe's ult is just way more fun and way more effective, but you know, I respect the pick regardless. If you want to see your answer featured in a future video, drop your answer to today's question in the comments down below. Now let's get back to the video. Seraphine is the undisputed queen of mid lane, and while Zed is still pretty good, he's not nearly as dominant as the pop star. Zed's all-in potential with Deathmark and his poke with his shurikens is still extremely potent, and his lane phase is great. But with champions like Darius and Shyvana rising to the top, he is becoming slightly less powerful. Zed excels at assassinating priority carries, but struggles when he has to duel bruisers and tanks that can build armor while still out DPSing him. Don't get me wrong, he's still very strong and is great against squishier compositions, but just don't pick him up every single game, especially blind pick. Yasuo has been moved up from the B tier to the A tier. While still being extremely hard to play, he has been finding more success on the Wild Rift than initially expected. His wind wall is, as always, extremely obnoxious for many meta champions to deal with. Ultimate reliant champs like Sona, Seraphine, and Ashe really struggle when they have to deal with Yasuo, and they're all shaped up to be powerful picks that you'll be seeing a lot of in games. Yasuo is still very hard to pilot correctly and takes a long time to master, so we're only expecting him to become stronger as people become better at playing him. Lux has also ascended into the S tier as she's been finding more and more success on the Rift. She's great at picking off enemies with Light Binding and Final Spark, and can also support her allies with shields and crowd control. She packs a ton of burst and is a pretty strong overall laner. When Lux gets ahead, she will be bursting down everybody on the enemy team. And even when she's not ahead, she can still contribute with her supportive abilities. Her ultimate is also great for roaming to other lanes and helping them in fights, and also for helping her team when they're diving the enemy backline. Her hitboxes, like Seraphine, are also very generous, so it's pretty easy to catch people out. And here's our updated tier list for the mid lane. Draven, similar to Darius, has also landed as an extremely dominant AD carry. His axes allow him to dish out unmatched damage in the early game, and his extended all-in as well as his burst trades are very good. His laning in general is great no matter what support he's with. He works with enchanters like Sona and Janna that can keep him safe, and he combos well with engaged supports like Alistar. In the landscape of the Wild Rift, having high damage on his own and also having move speed and self-peel is incredibly valuable. His early strength is unparalleled, and he has the most influence over games out of any AD carry currently. He's a bit tricky to pilot at first, but once you get the hang of him, he's pretty smooth to play and can dominate any game. Some of you might not be surprised by this one, but Ashe was undervalued in our previous tier list, and she's been moved to the OP tier to match her in-game dominance. She's not as strong as Draven in lane, but her harass with volley is definitely obnoxious to deal with. Being able to scout the map with Hawkshot makes tracking junglers a breeze and provides immediate utility to the team regardless of individual performance. Meanwhile, her ultimate, Enchanted Crystal Arrow, is the perfect engage tool, providing a powerful stun that you can fire from extreme range and steer into enemies. Her damage is high, and her slow and her auto attack is invaluable for kiting champions like Shyvana and Darius, which just happen to be two of the most popular picks right now. Overall, Ashe's kit is fundamentally very good and is also overtuned, making her a very strong pick in every game. Meanwhile, Jhin has been moved down to the A tier in response to the fairly hefty nerfs he received this patch. His stat nerfs reduced his overall damage substantially, and the slow reduction on his traps is especially brutal. They were very powerful tools for kiting and crucial for surviving against the dominant bruisers. With the slow being lowered, he's far more reliant on landing the follow-up Deadly Flourish, which can be a challenge against all the mobility you'll be facing on the Rift. Jhin is finding far less success on the Rift and has been moved down to the A tier accordingly. So here's our updated tier list for AD carries. Blitzcrank nerfs were extremely harsh, and he is no longer the reliable hook machine that he was previously. The projectile width reduction makes it way harder to hit hooks than before, and his mana pool and regeneration has also been gutted. You have far less hooks to work with, and they're more difficult to hit. This leads him to be, overall, much less successful. Of course, he's still great at picking out pesky enchanters like Janna and Seraphine, but you'll need to make every hook count since you don't get many. It's far easier to find success on basically any other support right now. Sona has become a very potent support on the Wild Rift due to the large amounts of grouped fights and her extreme power when she's buffing multiple allies. Crescendo is a great playmaking tool and can be effectively used to peel or engage. Sona works well at supporting carries and buffing up bruisers, so she's pretty much great in every composition. Sona is still very easy to kill in the early levels, but with the fall of Blitzcrank, her early game becomes much more secure and it's far easier to get to her payoff. She's also great at poking and sustaining in lane if she's not getting engaged on. And since support is mostly enchanters, with the exception of Alistar, she's in a good spot. Ashe did experience brief popularity as a support right after the preseason patch and introduction of new items for League of Legends, and because of this popularity, players decided to experiment with her in the support role on Wild Rift as well. However, her popularity has died down immensely, and she's proven to not be a very successful pick, and has just been removed from the support list in general. So here's our updated tier list for support. And just like that, that wraps up our updated tier list for the 1.1 mid-patch update. Remember, this tier list is meant to encompass all levels of play, so you might find that it's not exactly 100% accurate for your tier, but it'll give you a good indicator of what's generally strong. We'll be covering what's different in high elo in a video coming out soon, so sub to the channel so you don't miss out. Thanks so much for watching, and make sure to answer our question of the day in the comments down below. As always, best of luck on Summoner's Rift, stay hydrated, and wash those hands.